The chair's a bit bouncy. Just be careful when you sit down.
Hello.
Sure.
It's all right for the young ones, not for the old boys.
Oh, it's comfy.
Look down the lens for me, please. Quiet on the floor, please. Quiet on the stairs, guys. Thanks.
Rio, take one interview marker.
Hi, I'm Ferdinand and I'm a pundit for TNT.
My name's Eniola Aluko.
Frank Warren, boxing promoter.
Hi, I'm Dina Asher-Smith.
Hugo Monye.
Judy Murray.
Reshmin Chowdhury, broadcaster.
What do you want to get out of this conversation?
I'm here to listen.
To hear other people's experiences.
We can all learn a lot from each other.
I want people to lean into conversations rather than stepping away.
The amount of times I've gone, oh, I'm sick of being called a tick box. But then I go, if I give up, we're taking 10 steps back.
I don't think you need to be ticking boxes. You need to have people there who can do the job.
You need examples, not just on the pitch, but also in the decision-making areas, the boardroom.
If the right people use their positions to make great things happen, people will follow.
Diversity does bring success. And I definitely think sport in this country has a very long way to go.
It's hard to change today, but you can change tomorrow today.
Guys, it's so great to have this glittering panel alongside me today. We're going to talk about something that is a very important matter in sport. It's about the representation of black and ethnic minorities at the very top level of sport, basically the people that make the decisions. And I know that, you all have so many stories to tell and so much experience within all your various industries, so I'm really looking forward to just getting a bit stuck into that as well. I'm going to kick off with this man next to me because what's interesting about football is it's so diverse on the pitch in terms of, in the Premier League, I think it's something along the lines of 47% of players are black. In the EFL, it's over a third. And yet, when it comes to representation in boardrooms and on the commercial side and in so many aspects, you just don't see it. So what is the deal here?
It's a difficult question. I don't know. It does confuse me. I look at it and think, well, the players on the pitch for a number of years now, the representation is there. The diversity is there, but that's not then reflected in the boardrooms or the positions of power or decision-making areas within football clubs. And then you look at it, and I'd love to hear what you have to say, Frank, on this, because you're obviously a leading light in your sport at the top end and making decisions. The people that run the football clubs in football, most of them are middle-aged white guys. Now, at the top end of business, and football is a business, normally the people that get the jobs around those areas, it's normally who you know. Friends game, okay, yep, he's good, but I know him as well, so I'll give him the opportunity. Those people that are running the football clubs, I would say most, if not all of them, if they had a table like this, the friendship group wouldn't have a diverse mix like we've got here. So that's represented in who then gets employed or who gets them big jobs. So I think that's the issue at the moment.
In boxing, I think we're very lucky in as much that, like football, it's a working class sport. Majority of the people involved in boxing come from working class backgrounds. They don't have money, and it is quite diverse. At the top level now, it's changed a bit. The vice chairman of the Boxing Board of Control is Guy Williamson, former boxer. He's a lawyer, a black guy, hasn't been a boxer himself. Lennox Lewis is a honorary steward. The honorary medical officer is Asian, Dr. Patel. So there is a start as such there. Well, it has been for a couple of years, but it could be better. But to be better, I don't think you need to be ticking boxes. You need to have people there who can do the job. And there are improvements that should be made and can be made at the Boxing Board of Control.
You talk about sort of standard bearers, you need them in the boardroom as well. And I know you've sat in boardrooms at executive level as well. There are some clubs, like Brentford, I think, who do it really, really well. They are representative of the community that they're in, but it's because they actually make a commitment to do that. And more people need to be doing that.
Absolutely. I think it's really important to actually amplify clubs like Brentford because they're a success story for a lot of things. The way they run their club, the recruitment on the playing side. But on the board level, it's a very diverse, and I know them really well. Whether it's Deji Davis, who comes from a finance background, half Nigerian, Nigerian man, very, very bright. Niti Raj, Asian man who's the head of legal, And I've met the owner, Matthew Benham, who is a very progressive man, right? So it's very intentional about who is making the decisions at the top of Brentford that then reflects what they're doing in the community. And I just think, you know, if we have clubs like Brentford as an example, that is proof that it works. There's a business case, I suppose, for, you know, diversity at the top level, because it's not just about the visual. You know, these have to be excellent people in what they do. And there is, but it's the route to that point that I think we're talking about. How do we get excellent people from diverse backgrounds at the top level of sport? But you have to be intentional about it, like Brentford have.
Yeah, it's about having the pipeline, isn't it, really, and actually...
good examples as well, having good examples.
But also, as Rio said, it is about the network.
Interestingly, we've been talking about the executive side of it, you know, right at the top. But Judy, when you look at tennis, just in general, representation in tennis doesn't appear to be where other sports are.
Yeah, I think we are perceived as difficult to do, difficult to access and expensive. We're a very white British sport. And for me, it is about numbers. It's about taking our sport into places and to people that don't currently have access to it. Very few state schools have tennis courts now. They've lost them over the years because they were big spaces that maybe weren't being used enough. They get used for something else. So you need places to play, first of all, and then you need a workforce to create activity. But in the experience that I've had of taking tennis into rural and disadvantaged areas, you don't go in for one and done and run one workshop or one clinic and expect it to stick. You have to have a plan to go in for the long haul, and you invest in the community and you invest in the people. That's where you spread the sport and you get the numbers on the base, and from that you create a pathway. So whether that's a career pathway for coaches or officials, or whether it's a playing pathway, you have to have all of that, and out of that, many years later, you will start to get people who can really make a huge contribution at board level.
We talk a lot about representation, don't we? And I totally agree with what Frank says. It's not just ticking boxes, it's about finding the right people for the right job, but also creating pathways for difference of opinions and not being stuck into, oh, well, this is what has always been done before. Because when you're at that level, effectively, you're there to represent the sport, but are you there to represent the people that play the sport? And I think there's a massive disparity between the two. There is a visibility thing. If it's never been done, then it's quite hard to even think that it might even be an option for you. But if you are starting to see it, and Brentford are a great example of it, but by the way, every Premier League club says they do it, but they don't. It's PR. Everyone needs to be seen to be doing the right thing these days, 100%, but there needs to be substance to it.
You absolutely want the best person for the job in any role, irrespective of ethnicity, background, whether they're a former athlete or not. You have to be the most competent. But even saying that, if I think about track and field or athletics, particularly in Europe, and if I'm thinking about in the UK, I know that the head of the power stream is Paula Dunn, a black woman. But then outside that, I would really struggle to think, besides boards and in roles directly contributing to ethnicity and diversity, where anybody that is not white would sit. And that kind of goes through coaching, or at least the high-level coaches, performance coaches. That goes through the administrative board, the performance directors. That goes through, even sweeps through the majority of the physiotherapists and stuff like that. And what frustrates me as an athlete, like I've been, in the sport, in the system for a very long time. So lots of people are very comfortable with me. They pick up the phone and they talk, even if it's from a management perspective, because I often find myself, bringing people back. Sometimes I've got that Zen aura. But people also get very comfortable to air opinions with you. And often I just, quite frankly, would call it for what it is. It's racism a lot of the time, because some of the gripes that people have with staff, with coaches, with physiotherapists or whatever, say somebody makes a mistake and they're on probation, or they're, just been brought in and it is like an ethnic minority. Lots of the time there is an instant assumed incompetence, as opposed to somebody needs an opportunity to shine. It's so frustrating. So I think just from the bottom, from the start, and just being completely upfront, people really have to examine their assumptions and how they view people, and give people the space to be, the space to learn, and the space to grow.
Because you're measured differently
Absolutely.
in kit as you are in a suit. In my playing days, if I had a bad game, if I made a mistake or whatever it was, I got judged the same as like everyone else, because everyone has a bad day at the office, everyone has a bad day on track or on a pitch, football, rugby, tennis courts, whatever it might be. But you get put into a position of potential power, decision-making position, put a suit on, and the pressure's different for that person, because we rarely see people from ethnic, diverse backgrounds in those positions of power. They're not just representing themselves anymore. Because if they're in a position which hasn't been occupied by certain faces or looks or dialects or cultures or religions, then they're actually representing all of those things.
It's crazy that you say that, isn't it? That point is like, it is wild to think that somebody of colour goes into a position that is already full of pressure, expectations, result-driven, but they also have that external pressure that other people are not afforded. They don't have to have that. Just because you're born to a certain race, that ultimately just happens to you and you've got to deal with it. You have to accept it because it's the world we live in right now, but you shouldn't have to.
Not 2023.
But it is now, you know, when I was, as I say, many years ago, when I was younger, you know, for me, I can remember getting involved in things and you was basically pushed over to one side and you had to go and fight for it. And I'm sure it's much more difficult if you're a person of colour to be in that position and you've got to fight your way through. But isn't that part of it, that you've got to grit your teeth and put your blinkers on and think to yourself, whatever happens, I've got to make it happen?
I think what you're referring to is a system that supports you in that pursuit to make mistakes too. You know, in my world, if I'm hired by an owner who goes, right, I believe you can do this, regardless of whether you're black or woman, I believe you are qualified to do this and I am qualified to do this, I'm not going to be perfect in that role. If I make a mistake, I need that owner to go, doesn't matter. Whereas what a lot of the time, I think what you're referring to, it's a confirmation bias, where already there's a bias that goes, that person's not as competent as they should be. So the minute that something confirms that bias, they then get rid of them. I think everyone around this table is successful because we're driven and we have a relentless pursuit for what we want to do. But you need systems that support ethnic minorities to not be perfect.
Frank, can I ask a question? Do you think sport's gone woke?
Yeah.
Yeah, we do want role models, but do they have to prove that they're worthy every single time?
I don't think there's any black people out there that want to get a job because you're black.
Frank, can I ask a question? Do you think sport's gone woke?
Yeah. Yeah, I do. And that's why I don't like that. I genuinely believe that, I believe everybody should be given the same opportunity, and whoever gets that job should be the best person to get it. Should there be some proportional representation? Yeah, I think you've got to look at that, and I think it must work. But it should be done as you were saying earlier, you know, let's fill that role. That's wrong. It's people who can contribute. I mean, you know, and you're saying with Brentford, I mean, you should be on the board. You know, you should be doing it. I mean, you're very smart, and
You're listening, Brentford.
It's there, you know what I mean? It's there to be done. There's no doubt about it.
I think that's a huge point, because I don't think there's any black people out there that want to get a job because you're black. That's a big point.
Nonsense, isn't it?
Point.
Who wants
Yeah,
that?
that's nonsense. You don't want to be in that room because ethically it's wrong, but also as an individual, you'd be sitting there and going, this is not where I'm meant to be. I'm not here because I'm good enough. And then you end up not doing the best job because you're questioning every single decision and move that you make. People of colour want the opportunity to get through the door.
To contribute.
Exactly.
I think sport has a lot more work to do. I think I have maybe a somewhat different context, because coming from track and field, I feel like it's a truly global sport, in that you've got people coming from India, you've got Kenya, you've got Jamaica, you've got the USA. So I get a front row seat to see how different federations in other countries have worked, quite frankly. And that's whether they are like Kenya, where like the majority of people there are black, or it is somewhere like the USA where like it's very diverse, you know. So I definitely think sport in this country has a very long way to go. I sit at, the front line where I see lots of different teams and lots of different federations in working in completely different ways. So when I say I hear the biases, I really hear the biases.
Judy, you faced a bias as well as a woman. And we're talking about the outside perception. From your point of view, are you seeing that perception changing? Because it must be frustrating being in that world when you have a very different viewpoint. So I just wanted to see, sort of along the scale, what you've seen on your journey.
If I'm looking at my sport, particularly on the women's side, if I look at some of the players that are coming through now, Coco Gauff, Naomi Osaka, and Ons Jabeur. Ons Jabeur, Tunisian, first Arab woman, first Muslim
woman, yeah.
Firstly, it was top 100, then it was top 10, and then it was Grand Slam final. And she has got the most wonderful personality. There's your role model. And for that area, for her country in particular, I think we were talking about this earlier, that for me, all major change has to come from the top. It has to come from the leader. Great example from about Brentford. You know, the ambition, the vision, but the strategy, the action, putting it into place. So, you know, if I look at Tunisia, immediately, Ons Jabeur starts to come through enormous initiatives to get more young girls, particularly playing tennis, but to open the sport up to many more people, but also to bring in WTA events and ATP events. Somebody's got to make that happen. Somebody's got to sense the opportunity and make it happen. And I think if I look at Coco and Naomi Osaka, they're both young women who've spoken out, used their voices really well to rally against whether it's Black Lives Matter, whether it's mental health pressures of being in the public eye and so forth. And I think that's one of the things that we have to do, particularly on the female side, for me, is to encourage women and girls to speak up. Because you won't get any change if you don't talk about it. I think, I remember Billie Jean King saying to me, if you don't make a noise, nobody will hear you. And she's always
made a noise.
She's made a lot of noise over the years. But yeah, I think if the right people use their positions to make great things happen, people will follow, because people follow a leader before they follow a vision. So you need strong people.
It's a great point. Sorry, just quickly to swivel back to my sport, football. I think that's a huge area that football could learn from other sports from, in just having that collective, unified approach. Because you see, if there's big issues in other sports, NBA, for example, there's an issue in the NBA that the players aren't happy with. They come together as a group, have a unified approach and go, right, we're going to shut the league down, or we demand X, Y, and Z, and the league listen. Because if LeBron does it on his own, he's one of the most iconic sportsmen in the world, nothing changes. You can't move the dial on his own. But the moment they all come together, it's a huge impact. And media, business, players, all have to take notice. And these guys are media companies on their own, bigger than some of the biggest media companies on their own. So our players, I think, in my sport, 100%, I think, to have big change and to really move the dial on the issues, they need to come together. You saw what Marcus Rashford done. That was fantastic. But you imagine if there was a group of them doing that. You saw Raheem Sterling done talking out about racism. That lasted not long, but because he's on his own. But you have a group of them that say, no, we're not going to have this. We're going to stand together. Then you're going to have big opportunities to change. And until that happens, it's going to be, you're almost climbing up a wall without ropes behind you supporting
But Rio, Judy, why are players doing the job of the government and the sporting bodies? So Naomi Osaka, Coco Gauff, I mean...
Exactly.
They
should be allowed to
I know
focus on
that.
playing.
She's a young adult. I mean, and we know the convening power that certain icons and individuals have, but as an athlete, all you want to do is focus on being an athlete.
Exactly.
Yeah, but you shouldn't have to do that. I understand, but Muhammad Ali's the guy he is for that reason.
In an ideal world, that's what I mean. Where we are, it's kind of a bit what I was referring to before, but yeah, it's amazing that Naomi Osaka, Coco Gauff, they're doing amazing things. It's amazing when Serena, Venus, amazing when Billie Jean King, but should Billie Jean King have had to go through that to be accepted?
I agree. They shouldn't have had
to. No, but
it's the life we live in. They have to.
Amazing, absolutely amazing. And I feel like, should you do it again? Absolutely. Like, it's exactly the right thing. But when we talk about that pressure, that is very unique for women. It's unique for ethnic minorities, and it's also unique for the LGBTQ+ community in sport. That unique pressure of being the role model, the ideal, the perfect example of what it means to be an athlete or in a boardroom or anything. That's exactly what we mean, because, yeah, we do want role models and we do want people to do the right thing, but every single time, and do they have to perform and prove that they're worthy and prove that they're perfect to get acceptance by other people or another ethnic group? which is another
There's
excellent
always
question.
going to be a baptism of fire for the first person to do it, or the first group of people. For example, Rio, when you look at refereeing and coaching in football as well, you know, we've seen people who have been black referees, very few examples, black coaches. When you see that kind of bias on that level, you don't have the voice to speak up, particularly for referees. You know, they're going to be put off, aren't they?
Yeah, I do think it'll be off-putting. If definitely, I think to be a ref anyway is off-putting.
Yeah.
Because of the
You've got to have a certain mentality to be a
No
ref.
one's
be a
going to
certain
like you,
type
are
of
they?
human being to be a referee, because you know you're walking into a job where you're going to get abused at all levels, whether grassroots or to the first team and Premier League and so on, the top level. But also with coaching, I think you look at my generation now, and there are coaches that you see consistently they're getting jobs, very good jobs, then maybe falling out of the jobs because of performance, but then quite quickly getting back on the track.
Their name's always in the hat.
And I mean, you look at John Barnes, fouled once. I think if you say he fouled at Celtic, okay, doesn't get another opportunity really. Paul Ince had a couple of opportunities, but at a much lower level. And you would say in terms of the way his career went, he was at a similar type of level to a Gerrard and Lampard and Rooney. Sol.
Yeah.
Sol
was
has
a
been
massive
probably
example.
one of the loudest in terms of saying, I want a job, get me a job. Now, we can argue whether he's good enough or not, but he's having to go down about 2 or 3 rungs before he's even getting an opportunity compared to the people that he was playing alongside in his era. So therein lies an area where you're going, okay, everyone's asking the question, why? And obviously, the people that are making decisions can hide behind there's hysteria, can just sit back, and there's other people having to answer these questions, but the decision makers kind of sit in the background and don't have to answer that question because they don't have to. They're not being pulled in front of the media to do that. So that's where I'm saying, and we're all talking and probably aligned in that, unless those opportunities are afforded to these people, they can go in and prove themselves. We then get an opportunity to see the example. We're not seeing that at the moment, and that's the problem.
If we were to sit around this table now and say, what's the best football player? We don't even think about race. We go Mo Salah or, you know, Bukayo Saka, depending on who you support. Because we've got to that place now where on the pitch, it's about who's the best. So for me, the perception about who's the best when it comes to leadership still needs to change.
Absolutely.
People don't see good leadership as black or ethnic minority. It will get there if we do what we did on the pitch. Once upon a time, there was no black players on the pitch. You used John Barnes as an example. Now, if we all just sit here, without even thinking, we go, he's the best because he's the best, or she's the best because she's the best. So I think we need to get to that point of how do we change perception about leadership of people who are not white? Because I still think there's a bit of like, okay, is that a tick box? People second guess.
Colin Osborne, you worked with him, one of the few black coaches. I mean, do the same deterrents exist in rugby that we see in football?
Yeah, I might sound like a massive hypocrite because I retired, I could have gone into coaching and I decided not to. So it's hard to answer on behalf of everyone. I can only answer from my experience, and Colin was probably the most influential coach I had. I had a lot of good coaches, but he was the first one to give me an opportunity. That's all you need, right? And he set an example, but I think his quality was he was able to mix, mingle and understand me that much better. So there's a really good example. There's this kid who I partially mentored at Harlequins, the club I played for. And I remember the coach ringing me at the time and said, can you have a chat with this lad, Nigerian heritage? I said, what's up with him? He said, well, I think he's lazy. I said, okay, cool. He said, he's just late to training, he's this, that, and the other. And I said, okay. So I rang him. I said, bro, what's going on? He says, well, I'm got my exams. Also, after school, I have to pick up my brother and take him home on the bus. And then I've got to do all this. And then I've got to get myself to training by a train and by a bus. And I thought, this coach who wasn't black and he didn't understand the cultural difference. And I just thought, this kid isn't lazy. He's actually got so many more pressures, which are often affiliated and associated to certain ethnic minority people than it is for a lot of the other players. I thought, if you just knew the kid That for me was such a vivid memory of a coach that just didn't get the player because you didn't get the person.
Couldn't inspire him at all.
Well, of course, but if you don't understand the pressures that he's under, you're never going to understand him, and therefore you're not going to give him the same bandwidth of opportunity potentially, where I thought, this is a kid who's doing the most. He's trying to be an athlete. He's trying to be a good brother. He's trying to be a almost good second parent and do all of that. And the net outcome of it is you think he's lazy. He's doing the most.
Yeah.
You don't get him.
It's the cultural nuances, isn't it?
My mum didn't want me to play rugby.
Of course.
I mean, rugby doesn't have much of a footprint in
Ruin
Nigeria.
that face, does she?
That's it, yeah, rugby doesn't have much of a footprint in Nigeria, but Nigeria has quite a decent footprint in England. And I see a lot of Nigerian men who've represented Meritocracy, Anthony Watson, Topsy Ojo, the list goes on. So there's lots of it, but once again, and it goes back the other way, my mum didn't get it. Why would she get it in Nigeria, where she follows Nwankwo Kanu?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? She follows Nigerian footballers.
Another Arsenal player.
Yeah, JJ Okocha.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? She gets that. Rugby, what is this?
There is no point being at the table unless you're actually going to bring value to the table.
You have a duty to understand each other. Otherwise, you're not going to get anywhere.
You say, we're going to expand the board. You come in and you approve yourself.
There has to be a desire to change. And often that desire to change any, especially at the boardroom level, will mean not choosing amongst your mates for the jobs, as you said, jobs for boys that we know. But what's really key here, Annie, is that someone's got to give up their seat at the table. And do people actually want to do that?
No, I mean, and that again is human nature, right? Like, you know, at the top level, you're talking about owners who have a lot of money, who have a lot of power, and why would they just give up the seat because you're an ethnic minority? Either we have a situation where boards expand.
That's the way forward.
Boards expand so that the table gets bigger.
Why?
Well, because I think if you honestly...
I don't want a board to be bigger just because we need to add on another woman.
But
I think keep the board as it is, but let that board and that system be representative. We live in a progressive world.
But it's not happening though,
But this is what we're talking
It's not
about.
happening at the level that we need
So you just
it to
make it
happen.
bigger.
But if you've got a
Well, I think
successful
that's a
club, do
solution.
you
A
want to get
solution.
rid of somebody from that board position
They're not going to go.
just to prove
Why
the
would
point?
they go?
It's not to prove a point because anyone that you bring in should be there because they're qualified.
Exactly, but
Like
why
my
would you,
leadership-
if you're, for example, if you're Man City, using that as an example, they're a successful club, and are they going to change their board for the reasons we're discussing today? And I would think the answer
Then
to that is
don't say that we want to be a community club that represents everyone in the community. I don't mind. I don't mind what anyone.
So, but to get back to the point, sorry, guys, what you're saying, you can't sacrifice someone to prove a point.
Why is it
But you can bring. Well, if you're saying that, right, you've got to go because I want to bring somebody on to show that we are reflecting Britain today. I don't think that's right. I think what
I agree.
you do, I think you say we're going to expand the board. You come in and you approve yourself. You come on and you prove yourself.
See, for me,
you're part of that.
A, it's not sacrifice, and B, it's not proving anything. It's just doing what it's actually just fulfilling the vision. Every club, every union, every institution has a mission statement. I don't care what people say they want to do. I just care about the things they do because they say they want to
And
do.
also, I think it brings success, quite frankly. When I just think about representations in key positions, it's actually about serving the people that you represent, and that, yes, it's the nation, but also it's the athletes. It's also the athletes. If I think about, I'm coming from a track and field perspective, but I guess you could also apply it to football and stuff like that. If you're thinking about in-house stuff, lots and lots of the people that you are serving are of ethnic minority backgrounds. And if you bring back that story about that coach that kind of had a nuanced understanding of what that particular athlete was going through. And even if I think about stuff like a media team, if they're finding it hard to talk about stories and think about experiences that might further engage fans, people have to also have a cultural understanding of what that person might have been through, what might be interesting. Is it Nigerian Independence Day? Is it Jamaican Independence Day? How can we engage people? When you're thinking about coaches, it is understanding where the athletes come from. So it's not proving a point and it's not sacrificing. I think the important thing is to illustrate the fact that diversity does bring success, and it's not tokenism. It's simply representing what we have as an organisation.
I agree with everything you're saying. I'm now talking about the practical side of it.
Yeah, this is a thing. This is
And
where
I'm
I'm getting
saying-
to, that we need a solution.
Like, when I was hired as the sporting director of Angel City, with some of the most famous people owning the club that we've ever heard, whether it's Alexis Ohanian, you know, a billionaire, whether it's Natalie Portman, like, my interview was the hardest thing you'd ever, I was on a Zoom call with Billie Jean King, like, it was scary, right? But I got the job. And I got the job because I had an amazing presentation and I'm qualified to do the job, right? Now, I insisted and said, I don't just want to be an employee. I want equity. I want to be on the board because this, you know, I'm building this club and I want to be part of your decision-making. I didn't replace anyone. They created that for me to be in those conversations at decision-making level. Now, had I replaced somebody, you're creating a situation where there's already friction because people are going, well, why has she replaced her? So what I'm saying is that I'm hearing what you're saying. It has to be reflective, which is why I had the opportunity to say, well, if in LA, you have to have a diverse board because you're reflecting of the fans, right? And they got it. If you want to diversify football boards quickly, we should not expect to be replacing people.
I don't think it's, I agree with your point about it's not about replacing, it's about
adding.
We need you,
But
we
that's what
need
I'm
your
saying,
added
add.
value.
No,
That's what I'm saying.
But who's making the decision of who
Add
they
to
need?
what-
Add
add to
seats
the
to the
table.
table.
No, I'm talking
and
about-
when those seats come to the table, so let's say, for example, we say to Chelsea, you really need to diversify your board, right? Because it's not reflective, right? They say, okay, we agree. Ugo, Eni, come on our board. It's then up to us, when we get on that board, to then influence the rest of the table. But I think it's unrealistic in the way just human nature is to then think we're going to replace decision makers who have invested their money in clubs. And if we do that, I think it causes more problems than I think we probably want. What we want is a seat at the table, or we create our own tables, which is a whole different conversation.
I don't think you're going to. I don't think you replace the people who put money in. Well, I don't think we'll even be replacing anybody. But what you're saying is that by expanding, that's how you do it. And then you're on there, and now show them what you're all about.
So many
Now show 'em
board
what you're
roles have been created
Yeah.
to satisfy more diversity. And I think it's a solution because then when that person gets on the board, then they say, okay, but we need more of this. And then you start to see the diversification of a board, whether it's women, whether it's people from ethnic minorities. I think when you're in a situation where you're basically asking somebody with a lot of influence and power to leave their seat for you, I think actually that can create problems.
It can do, but for me, and I totally understand everyone has a different viewpoint and a different way of leading. I'm fortunate to sit on a number of boards, and the language which is used in terms of, for a start, I don't want my position forever. I don't.
Right.
I want to do my job for a term, and then I want to be able to, in that time, do a really good job as well as create a pathway for someone else that might want to come in. I don't live in a protectionist society in my own little ecosystem. I want to do my job and then I want to leave. Certain people just want to sit there because they get lovely boxes, tickets, and all the perks that come with it. And so I understand as to why they want to protect it. So I don't see it as replacing someone or as a sacrifice. It's not a sacrifice if the person that's coming into the job is adding more intellect, more financial acumen, more understanding of the people that represents. They're only adding. So it's not a sacrifice. And so the concept of expanding is a short-term solution, but to do what? To pacify people who are old in their thinking. That's it.
Listen,
But in terms of a long-term impact, I'd prefer to keep it as it is, but it will only ever be seen as someone adding value if someone's leaving the table and someone else is replacing the table, if you fully understand what that person is bringing to the table.
I think it comes back to what we said before about all major change coming from the top. And so if you're the chair of the board and you're looking to bring new people on, or people come to you to ask or indicate an interest in going on, you have a duty to share your vision, your ambition, your strategy with whoever's coming on, and also to listen to what they think they can bring and the changes that they would like to see, because you both need to understand each other. Yeah. Otherwise, you're not going to get anywhere, are you? You're going to sit, you're going to take a seat at the table, and you're not going to be listened to. And I had a really good bad example from tennis, that the ITF, which is the global development arm of tennis, huge organisation, it a few weeks ago announced its latest sport. And I read it, and I'm going through it, and it's 14 men. Again, it was 14 men when I first noticed it back in 2010. And in between time, because of certain people campaigning, there was 12 men and 2 women. And the 2 women who were on it were both former players, great players. And this is a global board. And they came off it because they weren't being listened to.
That's the other
and they said,
It's
we're
like
not wasting my
tokenism.
time. Yes, tokenism, exactly.
So there is no point being at the table unless you're actually going to bring value to the table.
Unless you go in and get your hands dirty, you're not going to make any change.
I think it's really important for those of us who are in those positions as trailblazers not to give up.
You can't allow yourself to be there and be the token.
So, Eni, your sort of solution, if we're looking at pathways of moving forward, your solution is create more seats at the table. Judy, I'm going to go around to everyone. What is your solution?
It definitely is about more seats at the table and more diversity in the seats at the table. And some years ago, I created a female workforce development programme for the LTA, which is our governing body, because we had so few females in not just in coaching, but in fitness training and physios. And it bothered me because we are a 50-50 society. In tennis, we're a relative 50-50 split in terms of participation. And I started with 28 ambassadors. I was to train them up, and they were to go out into the field. What I noticed on that first training weekend that I had them was, we're all white. We're all white. And I said, right, first thing we got to do is when we take the next intake, we have to have diversity, and we need to have disability as well. And next intake, same. And I went, right. So I did it myself, and I went, right, I went out and I spoke with the Muslim Women's Sports Foundation, I spoke to BAME groups, and we created workshops I wanted to really assess who was interested, what would the challenges be. A lot of the challenges were around the fact that many Muslim girls can't be taught by men, and most men are sports coaches. There was so much I didn't know
It's nuance,
until I got in.
Of course.
And some of these women who came along were just absolutely brilliant. There was one who I became very friendly with called Nalette from Bradford, and she was white British who'd converted to Islam. But as a white Brit, she'd learned to do sport and loved sport. She now can teach 11 different sports. She's qualified to teach them because it was the only way in her area to get sport to girls. There were so many challenges, but unless you go in and get your hands dirty and stay in for the long haul and create relationships with the people who know those communities, you're not going to make any change. So I would like to get rid of the tokenism of the one and done. Yeah, we did a workshop in there. Tick, great, 50 people, good for us. Get in and do it properly.
I can relate to listening to a lot of that because of my cultural background. So I think that's amazing that you actually did get your hands dirty, and that commitment came from you, and you were able to affect that kind of change. And we need more people like that, certainly. Okay, Ugo, one big change that you think will actually create something different.
What I'd like to see ultimately is do the things you say you'll do. Like, it couldn't be any more simple than that. Everyone has a mission statement, a plan, a PR campaign, whatever it is, do it. But you'll only do it if it means something to you and it really matters. But yeah, to distill it, do the things you say you do.
Dina.
I agree. On a similar vein, I would just say it's a willingness to change. people from ethnic minorities, disabilities, LGBTQ backgrounds, women. You can force change, and that is definitely a way to change. You can change from the bottom, you can change from getting in there and really trying hard, but also there has to be a willingness to listen, because if you are expanding the table, people have to want to listen to you. You can't allow yourself to be there and be the token. So you have to make sure people are willing to listen, and then the onus is put back on people who can affect change, being willing to change that. If you've got a mission statement, that means following it, that means sticking with it, that means talking about these issues outside of Black History Month. It means doing all of these things consistently and really going with the times as well, particularly for this country.
Yeah, I suppose people have to be held to account as well. So when those mission statements are out there, people on the outside have to be able to point to the results, tangible results.
So, Reshmin, just on that, we touched on it earlier, you touched on it earlier in terms of allies. I remember I was interviewed last year for Black History Month. They said, who are the personalities you looked up to? Like, I love Michael Johnson, okay? Like, him at the Atlanta Olympics, the 4 and the 2, unbelievable.
Amazing.
I'm an Islington boy, support Arsenal, Ian Wright. And they said, who else? And I said, Gareth Southgate. And they were like, he's white. And I was like, yeah, spoiler alert, yeah, he's white. But,
He's fab, though. He's fab.
But I'm not here to talk about his tactical management skills on the pitch, but as a leader and as an ally, he became a force of nature because he represented his team in a way, because he connected to them, and he had to lobby against the highest office in this country. And if we could get more people caring for things that don't immediately matter to them, then I think we'll be in such a greater and more richer place. In the same way you do, and Frank, just hearing your stories and the way you represent your people and your sport is truly remarkable, and you cannot undervalue the sense of allyship.
Whenever I see Gareth, I tell him, I think you're phenomenal. I want somebody like you around track and field. I want that, because just to lead off what you said, the allyship cannot, how important that is, cannot be understated. Lots of people in his position, they don't take the time to understand, they don't take the time to display empathy, and it's not just on the issue, but even how he's backed his players.
I think I mentioned it before, and I think it was mentioned about intentions earlier. I think grassroots, up the pyramid of the game, you see the diversity on the pitch. It's there for everybody to see. It's not there in the boardrooms or the positions where people can make decisions or as part of the workforce off the pitch. There needs to be an intention, but that has to be a culture change, a culture shift from the top down. I work for one of the best managers ever, best leaders. He created a culture and everybody followed him. He was the leader in the area that he commanded. That culture was driven by him. But the best people for the job were employed and given jobs and opportunities. And that has to happen from the top of all the football clubs in our game. Because if those people that are running the clubs, the major shareholders, the big decision makers, don't have that culture shift in their minds, this conversation will be here in 10 years again.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we don't want, as much as I like you all. And Frank, what would be your kind of the one change that you want to see in this industry?
I honestly do believe everything comes from grassroots. I think, you guys have been, you're brilliant. And I genuinely think it will happen. You know why it happened? Because you'll make it happen. You had the will to make it happen. You'll make it occur. This is what the future will be.
I think it's really important, just a really quick point as well, for those of us who are in those positions as trailblazers, not to give up.
Correct.
Right? Because the amount of times I've gone, I'm sick of being called a tick box. And it's social media and it's stupid and you can compartmentalise it. And there's lots of people that equally say, Eni, you were brilliant today. But sometimes it does get to you. But then I go, if I give up, it's like, if I give up, if Alex Scott gives up, if Karen Khan gives up, we're taking 10 steps back. Because we're in, and we've got to keep normalising before it doesn't even become an issue. So I think it's really important. In any industry, anyone watching this, if you're sort of the odd one out or the first, you're a trailblazer, stick to it. Make sure you're not a token when you're at that table. If you feel like it, call it out, because that will make them uncomfortable. Call it out, and as Frank says, do your thing, influence it, and that's when change, starts to happen.
We'll get there, guys. I feel like it's been such a great chat, so much discussed, so much, and I think the most important part is that everyone has a vision of how they want things to change. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
See you again soon.
We didn't eat any food.
You can dive in now.
It's plastic.